Hello, my friends. You would think that by this time I would have some tape marks on the floor blocking where I need to put this table every week. This is a portable table. And as you know, I'm often caught going live figuring out where it needs to be. So anyway, here we are. Welcome to our Tuesday Feels Like Monday cooking class. My name is Annie from MP, Mindful Palate, movement practitioner, Milwaukee proud. Perhaps you had a chance to catch our yoga practice this morning or yesterday. Maybe you've been part of the movement classes as well as some of the cooking classes that we have offered in recent weeks. So we have Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday this week. We had no class yesterday because of the holiday, no cooking class anyway. So I will make that up to you on Friday with something. Hi, Sandy. So today, well, before we get too far, I want to thank Milwaukee Rec Department for helping us to stay connected, for bringing these classes to you via their stream as well. I hope that you're all well and finding ways to make the most of this time that we have together. Perhaps some of you are choosing to kind of gradually creep back out into the world. We will be here for a while still, safe in our homes, bringing you these classes. So no worries about that. I'm getting some spring cleaning done in the meantime. I cleaned my pot rack and got some things tidied up this weekend. So I'm more presentable for the movies here. So today we are going to work with some wild foods. And before we get into food preparation, I want to talk to you a little bit about wild foods. There's so much to know, so much to learn, as you can imagine. So you may have heard me say in the past that I dabbled in some urban homesteading for a few years. This was probably maybe late or early 2010s. So I did that for a few years with my own garden and my yard, my space here at home, but also part of that was wild foraging. And so even before that, I had been taking some courses and working with some people to learn how to safely identify some wild foods and to learn how to cook with them. So it's not something I do as frequently or at the same volume that I used to, but I still do enjoy some of the wonderful spring ephemerals that we can eat. So before we get into cooking, so much to learn, I want to share some books with you that I have. So again, talking about urban homesteading, this one was one of my most prized reference books back in that time. I can take a picture of all of these later and post them along with the pictures if you're interested, but it's called The Urban Homestead by Kelly Coyne and Eric Knudsen. They're out in LA, I believe, doing some cool stuff out there, or they were at the time. I don't know where they are these days. Stalking the Wild Asparagus. This is a classic by Yul Gibbons. He's got some other ones too about nature. So that's a good one. And then a couple of cookbooks. So these read more like, this is more like a reference guide. This one is more, I suppose there are some recipes in here. There's some identification, but it's not a color coded, and look at all the dog ears. Wow, I got to go back and see what that was about. So some cookbooks though that I have in my collection. So this one's called Wild Flavors by Dee Dee Emmons. And that has some cool stuff in it. I was just looking through it recently, and there are some items in there that we have talked about, even lovage, which I grow in my garden, but that can be found more wild. So that's a cool one if this is something you're interested in. So there are tons of recipes online. They don't always give you, safe tips on the actual foraging part. So I'll address that in a moment. This was another beautiful book that I received from a yoga chef yoga friend down in Indiana. We had talked about doing a retreat together, which we may still in the future. And so this is a beautiful book. To be honest, I haven't cooked from it that much because it's pretty fancy. So the food's not necessarily, the book is fancy too, but I have no problem slopping all over a cookbook if it's going to bring me joy in producing beautiful meals. So anyway, the new Wildcrafted Cuisine, exploring the exotic gastronomy of local terroir. So that's fun too. So anyway, I will photograph those and make sure that those are available to you. So if you have not dabbled in any wild foraging, And, you know, whenever I talk about that, people say, oh, mushroom hunting. And so, of course, mushroom hunting is a form of wild foraging. It's just one small branch of it. So, and to be honest, I don't really do mushroom hunting. I mean, I have found morels before in the woods in the spring when it's damp, but getting into mushrooms beyond that, I think takes a lot more skill. And, you know, that's one of those situations where you can find things that you don't know what you're looking for, what you're picking or eating. It can be deadly. So as can be, you know, picking the wrong berries and that sort of thing. So on that note, make sure that you know what you're finding and looking for. So today, you know, if you can take somebody as a guide who knows what some of these items look like, that's safest, of course. You know, I don't recommend just going out willy-nilly and finding things, oh, this looks like good to eat. Like, make sure that you know exactly what you're finding. There are some wonderful guidebooks out there. You know, maybe stick to some of the more common items. So, which is what we are going to do today. So just some of the items that we can find this time of year. So today we're going to work with ramps, which are wild leeks. So those are out there. I was in the woods yesterday. I will not disclose my location because it's one of those things like mushrooms that people don't tell where their stash is, so they keep it secret. But you can find ramps in the woods these days. So they're part of they're like, you know, they're in the onion family, the allium family, which is the lily essentially. So those leaves, let me just show you. Those leaves look a lot like, I always think of an amaryllis. So they look a lot like that versus the leaves of a leek or a spring onion, which are more straight. Okay, so this is a beautiful, there were some fat ramps out there yesterday. I was super excited. I actually went out, I forgot my digging tool, and so I had to use sticks to kind of dig in around it and then just sort of wiggle and pull them out. So remember, as we are talking about wild foraging, this is actually one of the most important things right next to, you know what you're looking for and safely identifying, is the idea of conservation. So, you know, there's the leave no trace, leave only footprints, take only pictures kind of idea, which I totally subscribe to. So in you know, finding wild foods, unless you're talking about garlic mustard, which, you know, take all of the garlic mustard you can find. It's an invasive species, take it all. We'll talk about that in a moment. But aside from that, you don't want to overpick in any one area. So please be conscious of what you are taking. You know, like, you think of, if every chef in the world was out there looking for ramps, we wouldn't have any more. So we need to use, we need to be courteous, considerate, not only of other people, but of the environment, to be honest, to make sure that we're not, you know, over harvesting. The same goes with, you know, a lot of different ecosystems and that sort of thing. So it's the same here with some of these wild foods. You know, not just leaving them for other people, but leaving them for the animals. I mean, they're the ones that, you know, live there. So I had a place that I would always pick wild black raspberries. And over the years, I saw other people showing up there and I got really possessed. Oh my gosh, this is my, like, no, it's not your patch. If anything, it belongs to the animals, first and foremost. So remembering that conservation idea when you are picking. So I want to put that out there because that is very important. All right. So ramps. The one I mentioned last week when we were talking about, what we were talking about, maybe the lemon balm, I think. I mentioned catnip. So that's another wild herb in the same family as basil, mint, lemon balm. It has that square stem. It has a serrated leaf. I saw some this weekend, but I didn't pick it. That is fairly prolific. It's wonderful in a tea. It's very calming. I wouldn't say it's a minty flavor. It's kind of its own sort of grassy flavor. But that's available now. Garlic mustard, lots and lots and lots of garlic mustard. So this, like I said, invasive species. Garlic mustard has also a serrated leaf, kind of a shape like a spade. And it's starting to have these little white flowers. So one of the things that is important to note, getting this earlier than later for a couple of reasons. So first of all, this flavor becomes stronger as it gets older, as many vegetables do. But also, we want to try to get this before it goes to seed, because as it goes to seed, then it's just spreading and spreading. So this may be, we may be too late for that. Or actually, if you're getting the flowers, looks like the seed pods are just starting to form. So maybe you can get out there and pick before it starts throwing its seeds everywhere. But so, like I said, with garlic mustard, my theory with this is, like, if we can't beat it, eat it. It's there's a lot of nutrition in these wild foods as well. So you can use this in place of garlic. You can use it in place of chives. We're going to make a vinaigrette with it today. You could also do pesto. So, but that's, like I said, a couple reasons to pick it while it's young, because the flavor isn't quite as punchy, although maybe you like that. And then also, get rid of it out there before it goes to seed. So, you can look this one up, and I'll see. I had a picture of it for the event for today, but maybe I'll try to link to some other resources. So, but that's a fairly easy one to identify, and it's out there. The stems are still pretty tender. I won't eat the stems. I'm just going to focus on the leaves mostly. I suppose you could eat the flowers, but we're going to focus mostly on the leaves today. So that's garlic mustard. This is what I grabbed yesterday, which I found in about 30 seconds. It was just everywhere. So, I grabbed what I could. So besides that, violets. That's another wild food that you might not have thought about eating. I've seen a lot of white violets, the purple violets. That I have made jam with in the past, and that's just a refrigerator jam. So I actually remembered taking my daughter's Montessori class. They must have been, it was primary, so K3 through K5, taking them to the woods on a little field trip with their teacher, and we gathered violets. We went back to the classroom and made this jam. You can make it in a blender, and then we canned it like for Mother's Day. It was, the violets were prolific right around then, so I made this beautiful purple jam, and it wasn't a shelf-stable product. It was one that you would put in the fridge, but it's wonderful. So there are still violets out there, and also dandelions. Dandelions can be eaten. The greens are very, very nutritious. They're good for supporting the liver. So again, lots of nutrition in these wild foods. Hi, Jenna. Okay, Jenna, you have a gold mine. You didn't even have to go far. She said she's got all kinds of garlic mustard in her yard. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple recipes today, and then you can just cruise the web and find out what other things you can make with garlic mustard. So, Sandy, yeah, so violet jam, it's really beautiful. And so I don't know how long those violets will be around. It's every year when I go out to find things, it's like, okay, it's like between early May and, like whatever, I always think of violets around Mother's Day. So again, it depends on the weather, but typically you can find those around this time. So if you're finding, or wherever you're finding wild foods, another consideration is make sure it's not a space where there's been pesticide application. So I live close to the lake, and there's a bluff with a ton of garlic mustard and catnip and different things. But there are also signs posted that say, pesticide application. So I wouldn't want to harvest from there. So the same thing with dandelions. Wherever you're getting those, make sure that it's not, a swath of land that has been sprayed. Most likely, if there are a lot of dandelions, they probably haven't sprayed, but you get my point. Like, make sure you're checking it out. I see a lot in some of the county park areas that are near my house. Some of the different running paths and stuff, a lot of dandelions. And I won't, don't quote me on this, but I don't believe that the county parks apply pesticides broadly. So I feel like that's a safe place to harvest, but I haven't. So I haven't followed up to see what the case is there. But again, just know that, if you're harvesting from like a roadside, you can find wild asparagus, or you can find dandelions, or, Jerusalem artichokes. But if somebody has come along and sprayed that, then you might want to be careful about what it is that you're eating. So know where things are. Know the source. If it's your own land, and then you might be just fine. You have all that knowledge. So anyway, those are a few more things that are spring edibles that we can find. So we are going to make a garlic mustard vinaigrette and a ramp sorrel pesto. So we talked about that in the pesto class a few weeks ago now. I didn't have the ramps at the time, but I had the sorrel starting to grow in my yard, and I'll tell you some substitutions. So the recipes, I'll post the recipes as I do by Friday. You'll have them via my Facebook page, my business Facebook page. But Milwaukee Rec has been wonderful about posting a link to those. We just started doing that over the last couple of weeks. So they've been great about posting a link, and it's links to I don't know if that's a PDF, I guess, where you can then print it out. It's basically my handout printed. So, so you have that. So maybe you have it in front of you as we're beginning here. Otherwise, you could grab that today, or just wait for mine by Friday. And again, I'll have some pictures of things, and I'll have those books posted for you as well. All right, so on the handout, you have 3 recipes. You have a garlic mustard vinaigrette recipe, which we're going to make today, garlic mustard pesto, and then we have a ramp and sorrel pesto. So those pestos, they can be used in many ways, in soups, in dressings, in dips, on pizza, with pasta. So even though that may sound repetitive, you know, pesto, it's, you can do a lot of different things with them. Okay, so with this garlic mustard vinaigrette, we're going to just mix this up in a jar. So it's also kind of a one dish. I mean, aside from washing the cutting board, and I suppose I have things all measured out, but you get my point. It's not like we're use a food processor and we're gonna use a bowl. So it's hopefully minimal things to wash. So I'm just gonna pick these leaves off of the stems. This is the garlic mustard, and I'm gonna actually bruise them. Okay, so these seem like they're mild. They're not too punchy. But again, maybe you like that. So there are various recipes out there for garlic mustard pesto, and my advice is try some different ones. I mean, you have plenty of free garlic mustard to try different recipes. So find one that you like. Some of them call for garlic and garlic mustard. This one just has garlic mustard in it. It also has mustard. And if you're doing a search for garlic mustard, whatever, you'll often come up with a recipe that doesn't have actual garlic mustard, but it has garlic and mustard. So you may have to be more specific in your search. So it's only calling for a half a cup of packed garlic mustard. Of course, you know, you could put in as much as you want. Like I said, use it. If you can't beat it, eat it. I feel like I had some that were already picked off, and now where did they go? Okay. And also with this heat that we've had lately, some of these things, I've noticed, like the rhubarb is starting to go to seed, I mean, that doesn't mean that it's done. It may just be, you know, part of the plant is going to seed. But anyway, as soon as it starts getting really hot like this, things will start to bolt, which means they start going to seed. So if you've planted early spinach or even some, you know, lettuce or salad mix, it might start to go to seed. So get it while you can, pick it, and, you know, maybe start planting another succession if it's something that would be that would withstand heat of summer by the time it's ready. But anyway, just know, as this is that time of year where I blink and then I'm like, oh my God, my spinach is done. So let's set this side here. Okay, so I'm going to chop this garlic mustard. I probably got way too much here. And you can do this, you know, in a food processor. You could probably do this one in a blender since we have enough liquid. I've mentioned in the past that, you know, that food processor is better for items that we need to chop, that may be more pasty, or even making doughs. You can certainly use it for liquids. If you fill it above the place in the middle where the hole is, even if you have the blade in there, it could start to leak. So blender is great for things that have a lot more liquid. Food processor is great. Why can't I say that word? Is great for items that have that need to be more chopped. Okay. So, you know, I grabbed that little bottle, but now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, that's too small. That the mouth of that is so narrow. I'm just, you know, antsy to use that. I had it out last week for our herbal vinaigrettes. Sorry, herbal vinegars and oils class, and I didn't use it. I'm just itching here. So let me get a bowl instead to use this. We're actually going to use this garlic mustard dressing for a salad later in the week. So if you're wondering, well, now what do I do? Just wait. That's the Friday class, I believe. All right. I'm going to start with just that much. I didn't put all of this in here quite yet. I've got oil. So this is olive oil. I actually put olive oil. I had put a little bit of flaxseed oil in here as well. So olive oil is what the recipe calls for, but if you have another favorite oil that you want to use, go for it. I like to save olive oil or some of those other delicate oils for making dressings, the ones that are not as heat stable. They are, it's not going to be heated up here. So it's a good place to use that. I have the recipe calls for Dijon mustard. I have lots of brown mustard, so I'm using that. Instead, there's a little bit of sugar. You could use honey or agave or whatever your favorite sweetener is, or you could leave that out. I like to put it in there to balance that strong flavor of the garlic mustard. So you could add it without, see how it is, and then go from there. And I still didn't get this shivered. So this is a thicker vinaigrette. You could always thin it out with more oil and vinegar. So this is one that I would probably take, a spoonful of it. And when I make salads, tossed salads, I like to dress the greens before I serve them. This probably goes back to my restaurant days, unless somebody called for dressing on the side, because a little bit of dressing goes a long way. Even just a tablespoon or so put on the greens, and then tossing it with your hands, your best tool. Make sure they're clean, of course, or tongs, tossing it, and you'll be surprised at how much dressing can spread over those greens without globbing on a whole bunch, which not only saves you money, but if you're trying not to have so much dressing or whatever, it saves in that way as well. Okay, let's taste. Excellent. It's got a nice acidity to it, a nice balance. I don't taste the sugar so much. So, I think it's good right where it is. So again, that's our garlic mustard vinaigrette. So not much to that other than, again, gathering those ingredients. I had that olive oil and flaxseed oil. I used red wine vinegar. You could use whatever your favorite vinegar is. I talked about with our canning classes, you want to make sure it's at least 5% acidity. Here, use whatever you want. If you love that rice wine vinegar or some of the other vinegars that are under 5%, go for it. Use those. So I had red wine vinegar. Again, maybe this is a use what you have kind of a thing. I had the brown mustard. You could use Dijon. You could use dry mustard if you wanted to. And then a little bit of sugar or whatever sweetener you prefer. And then some salt. I think I may add some pepper as well. And if you wanted to add more garlic, do it. Garlic is antiviral. I was hearing somebody last week say that garlic has been hard to find at the store. So people are on to the antiviral qualities of garlic and they're buying it up. I'm fortunate to have some garlic from was it a friend CSA? No, those were garlic. What was that? Garlic chives. I got garlic. Oh, home delivery. So if you're having trouble finding garlic, maybe you want to go out into the woods and pick all the garlic mustard that you can find. You could even just puree it by itself, maybe add a little bit of oil and put it into ice cube trays and freeze it. And then you have, a temporary garlic substitute, for now. So just an idea if you can't find garlic in the stores and you like to have garlic in a lot of things, as I do. So that's our vinaigrette. So it's pretty thick. So I can certainly pour it into this jar. But I think I might pick one that's a little bit wider mouth. So I'm not going to get a tangle there in the bottleneck. So we are going to use that on Friday for one of our gluten-free whole grain salads or dishes that I am promising you. All right, so we have one more dish that we're going to make. So this is a ramp and sorrel pesto. So I showed you those ramps. So again, it's a wild leek. You can dig them up. They're just beautiful. And I've had a hard time getting green onions. So again, being conservative, not taking all the ramps. But these, one thing that's wonderful about wild foods is that they often have so much more flavor than the items we buy at the store. So this, I would say, is like twice as potent as a scallion. We talked about the lovage being, twice or 3 times or 4 times as potent as celery. The garlic mustard, maybe not as potent as a bulb or a clove of garlic, but still, there is some punch in these, so you don't need to use as much. So the bulb is usually what is most prized for sautéing. We're going to use the leaves today, not only because, I have another plan for the bulbs, but because people often think, oh, well, now what do I do with the leaf? It's just like a leek leaf, like the green part. We don't eat it. Yeah, we eat it. This is valuable. So that's actually how this recipe came up, is that during my urban homesteading days, when I was doing a lot more, even using more than you've seen me using now, I didn't want to waste anything. So I had all these beautiful ramp leaves, and I decided I needed to make something with them. So we're also going to use sorrel. This is from my, I wouldn't even say garden, from my flower garden. It just grows in my front yard on the hill with perennials and things like that. So sorrel is in the same family as beets. And if you've ever seen the leaf on a yellow beet, it looks very similar to the sorrel. It's got that same kind of stem. There's a red sorrel that has a red vein and little red veins throughout it, and I've seen it sold as a perennial, and it's called Bloody Dock. So that's in the same family. So again, with the beets. So I'm going to make sure I wash this really well. But this is some people call it an herb, some call it a green. I always think of it more of a salad green. I actually had a salad for lunch today with beets in it. I don't have any lettuce yet coming out of my garden, and I didn't have any from my home delivery. So I had lots of sorrel. So I tore this up along with some arugula that I got from a friend and mixed that in with some beets, and I had a little tossed salad. So it has a lemony flavor. I like to enjoy sorrel fresh. You can certainly make it into soups or put it in a saute, but it turns very drab green really quickly. So you really lose that beautiful green color. So I like to use it fresh, or, in this case, we're going to process it as pesto, and then, it may go into something that's cooked later. But for now, we're going to keep that nice and green. Okay, so that's, like I said, a lemony flavor. So in this, we have the ramp greens. So that's the kind of your onion flavor, the sorrel, so a little bit of lemoniness. It calls for a zest of a lemon. I have zested all of my lemons. I have them left for the juice, which I'm going to use today. But then I'm using dried lemon peel instead. So you could do that. Remember, if you're using dried herbs versus, and this isn't an herb, but it goes with the same rule. If you're using dried versus fresh, you would want to use half as much dried because it's more concentrated. Hey, Karen. Oh, thank you. Okay, so she mentioned picking ramps on. So I don't, okay, let me read Karen's. What is your understanding of picking ramps on park or preserved property? Picking mushrooms but not digging. Yes, so this goes with what I was saying earlier. So in terms of the stuff like garlic mustard and dandelions, things that are invasive, I don't believe there's a problem. My opinion is pick them because we're all trying to get rid of them. But if it's something like ramps or mushrooms where, we don't want to overpick, then absolutely get permission. There might be some, because that's a different situation. I mean, if it's a preserve, there's a different purpose for it than, somebody who's trying to chop down all the dandelions on park property. So thank you for bringing that up. That definitely goes along with the conservation idea that I brought up before. So when you have these invasive species, eat them all, that, help get rid of them. But when it's something that's a little bit more, I don't know in terms of native with the ramps, but when it's something that's more, can I use the word prized? I mean, I think dandelions are prized, but more prized like ramps or morels or other mushrooms. You don't want to just go out there, and picking those. I've never picked from a private preserve. I don't, in my mind, that's not something that's right. If it's somebody's own property, they can do what they want, but I have never picked any of those kind of foods on park property or private preserves. I've only done the invasives in those spaces. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, so back to our ramp pesto. Okay, so talking about the dried lemon peel here, and I've got a lemon, so I'm going to use the lemon juice, even though it doesn't call for it. I'm going to add that because I don't have my zest. Okay, so making this in the food processor, we're going to put our sorrel in. So again, you can use a little bit more of that if you want to. I'm going to put my ramp greens, and so I said half a cup, but this is probably actually a little bit more. And get those breaking up. Let's put that. So I have toasted pine nuts. You could use whatever kind of nuts you want, or if you don't want to put nuts in, you can leave those out. Hey, Ricky. He's hearing that if you pick only half the ramps in a clump, it will be okay for the plant. Is that true? That I need more information on. I know what you mean about them being in a clump. Sometimes you see two ramps growing together. I found that it's hard to not pick both of them if you're going after one. So I will have to look into that a little bit more. Good questions from all of you. Thank you for coming and presenting those questions. All right, so I'm adding my pine nuts to this, and we'll put that lemon peel in and get that going here. Putting that juice in there. And then I've got olive oil and I've got my Parmesan cheese. Actually, this is Romano. But any kind of hard cheese that you might have. We'll put that olive oil in a moment. Okay, so with your pesto, remember, whatever level of chunkiness you want. If you don't have a food processor, you can do all of this by hand. Oops, now I've got garlic mustard. We might try putting garlic mustard in this pesto. That might be kind of good. All right, so grating that cheese in there if you want to crumble it. I just don't want to put huge clumps of cheese in the food processor because they may not get chopped up before this turns into overly pasty. All right. And so again, if you don't want to add cheese, if you want to keep this vegan, you could do that as well. If you wanted something that was a cheesy flavor, you could add nutritional yeast, which has a lot of B vitamins that we sometimes miss if we don't eat meat. And that would offer, it would, the consistency will be different without the cheese, but you could have that flavor. And then scraping down the side of the bowl, I'm going to add my olive oil to this. Drizzling it around. Again, if there's an oil that you prefer, that you would rather use, since this is not going to be cooked to a high temperature, go for it. And I didn't add any salt or pepper yet. So then you can decide how thick you want this to be. So this is relatively thick. I might want it to, I'm just holding the blade in there. I might want this to be a little bit thinner, so I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil. So again, you can kind of play with the consistency. And here I'm going to add my salt and pepper. You can take some liberties. And again, if it's not as lemony as you want, you can add more lemon juice, more zest. It's been a while since I actually made this, since I took the time to hunt for ramps and then save that to save the greens. I want more lemon. So I have one more zested lemon in my fridge. Happy to use it. Getting all the bits of the lemon. So I used the zest last week. I don't know if that was in, might have been in one of our classes. I feel like I used that microplane grater for something. They're all mushing together. All the classes, all the weeks. All right, now let's see how this is. Because one of the things I like about this, with that sorrel being more lemony, is that lemon flavor. All right. Cool. That's it. So you can see it's a little bit more creamy there. So with pestos, if you weren't at our classes in recent weeks, I am going to portion them in a mini muffin pan. So you can do that with a tablespoon. You can do it with like a little ice cream scoop. You don't necessarily have to spray the pan first. So I'm just putting it in here. I'm kind of filling it to the top of each one of these. I'm portioning it because if I want to use this pesto and I just want a little bit at a time, I don't want to have to pull a big jar of it out of the freezer. I'm most likely going to freeze this. Pull a big jar out of the freezer, thaw it, and then freeze it again. Because anytime you're doing, in and out of the freezer, you're affecting the quality of that food. So I freeze it in smaller portions. Then once this is frozen here in this tray, I can pop those out and transfer them to a freezer container, a bag, or a jar. I actually store my pestos in mason jars in the fridge in those little tiny portions. So this is probably about a 2 tablespoon portion. What is that, like 2 ounces, I think? Yeah, 2 ounces. And so you could write that on the bag or the container, sorrel ramp pesto, 2-ounce portions, so that when you have a recipe that calls for pesto, and I often use pesto in just kind of a freestyle way, like, with pasta or something. So I'm not as concerned about, having the right amount. But my point is, anytime I'm freezing something like this, or even if I'm freezing, I think zucchini is a example I've used before. I freeze zucchini, shredded zucchini. I freeze it in the amount that my favorite zucchini bread recipe calls for. So let's say it's 2 cups of zucchini or whatever. Some kind of multiple of that. So I know I have enough to make a single recipe, a double. So putting that on there so you don't have to, with this, because it's in portions, you can pull off just a little bit. But if I'm freezing something like that, I'll often, put it in just the amount that our whole recipe calls for, and it's a little bit easier. So just some side notes on my theories here in the kitchen. So I'm smoothing this down in each of these little compartments, the muffin pan. And it's a beautiful color. I'm so glad that we're preserving the green, the bright green of that sorrel. So we have that. I'm going to put that in the freezer. We're just short of that dozen there. So I'm going to put those in the freezer, and then I will have that available to pop out of there and freeze and use however I want later. So there's your ramp sorrel pesto and your garlic mustard vinaigrette. There's also the garlic mustard pesto on the recipes. Again, you can print them out from the link that Milwaukee Rec has given, or you can wait for me to post them on Friday. So let me see if there are any other questions here. Ricky has posted something awesome. Edible Madison, very good. That's the edible magazine in Madison. Sustainable ramp harvesting, fantastic. Thank you for posting that. So everybody take a look. He had the question of picking only half the ramps in a clump. I don't often get lucky enough to find the ones that have the double, but I know what you mean. So that's very cool. I really appreciate you posting that. Thank you. All right. So any other questions about wild foods in general, about ramps or garlic mustard, about some of the other spring ephemeral edibles? I also, let's see, did I give other ideas on here? Yeah, so other ideas, again, they're on the recipes. Either of these would go really well with eggs. So if you wanted to make an egg bake of some sort or omelets, you could certainly add these pickling ramps. So the bulbs, I have often used those for pickling. So it would be like, a pickled onion, like a pickled, let's say cocktail onion. And they're wonderful. So I have a picture. I'll try to, maybe I can post that picture on the page later in the week just to show you what those look like. So with ramps, they have this beautiful, pink neck on them. So when that hits the vinegar, it gets even more brightly colored, and they make beautiful jars of pickles. So I would probably cut it. I think I usually cut them down to maybe 2 or 3 inches so that they'll fit into an 8-ounce jar. But if you had a taller jar, you could put that whole thing in there. And what a beautiful garnish that would be on, I don't know, Bloody Mary or something like that. So that's kind of fun, or even a relish tray. So that's excellent. But so we're talking about conservation, and we're talking about you can use different parts of the ramp. So this is another thing I like to make sure, whether it's, I don't eat a lot of meat, but when I do, I like to think about, using every part of the animal. I like the idea of, we're not just always eating the chicken tenders or always eating the chicken breasts, like some of those, let's make sure we eat the thighs, or we eat the, I want to talk about eating chicken skin, but some people like chicken skin, or using different parts of the steer or the pig. So if you are a meat eater, my point is, if we're going to use those things, let's use every part of them and not have waste. So let's not just throw away something that, could have been useful to another being, whether it's an animal or organism, I should say, or the earth. So again, just keeping those things in mind from a conservation and environmental standpoint. All right, so cool. We're almost at 2:45, so these classes this week are 45-minute classes. If you don't have any other questions, I can let you go, but just know that you can always post them on this thread, and I'll be able to get them and circle back and answer. If you have any other questions that you think of, send me a message if you want to. So look for those recipes by the end of the week. I will post the photos. I will also show you those books that I mentioned. And if anybody else has any other links, this one that Ricky posted is awesome. Thank you so much. Please share those. We can put those on the event page or something. So tomorrow we have, what are we making tomorrow? Mason jar salads. I had to think for a second. We're making mason jar salads. So what can you take in one container when you choose to be on the go again? Or maybe you just want to go get out of your yard and go to the park and have a picnic by yourself. You can pack a little salad or a meal in a jar. So we're going to talk about those tomorrow with lots of beautiful vegetables. And then Friday, we have another class for you. All right. So hope to see you at one of those. Again, thank you for joining us, and let me know if you have more questions. All right. Take care. Bye.